Hello and welcome to Talking Point Africa. I'm Maureen Nkandu. Today I'm joined by Joe Siegle, who is the Director of Research for Africa at the Center for Strategic Studies in Washington, D.C. Joe, thank you very much for joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. I just want us to put this into perspective. What exactly is going on in Niger? Of course, we know there is this coup. Where are things at this moment?
Well, things remain very fluid. And indeed, there's some debate about just what is happening in Niamey. But best we can tell, the head of the Presidential Guard, General Chiani, has detained the president, Bazoum, and has, basically declared himself the head of state. He's offered some very, feeble explanations for the need for a coup, calling it a gradual and inevitable demise of the country. That's why he needed to intervene. But, many analysts are pointing out that he was set to be retired in the coming months after having been the head of the Presidential Guard for the last 10 years. And so there's a sense that he was frustrated about being sidelined and decided that he was going to take action.
Yeah, so just to come in there quickly, because you say that the General Abdurrahmane Chiani is saying this is a people's coup, sort of seemingly representing the feelings of the people in Niger. Is this accurate? Is this a popular coup? Has there been support for it? With the population, people going out in the streets and celebrating, or it's a silent, quiet coup?
Well, 2 points on this. First, there have been protests against the coup, supporting President Bazoum, that the military put down. And moreover, there are a lot of protests outside of Niamey, where most of the president's base of support has been. Now, there have been other protests and riots in support of the coup, but these have also been promoted through the different information channels that are now controlled by the military. My second point is, it doesn't matter. This was whether the president is popular or not popular, that's immaterial. This was an extra-constitutional seizure of power. Now, if every time there was a democratically elected head of state that was down in the polls, we used that as a pretext for a coup, every country in the world would suffer a coup. So this debate about whether it's popular or not popular, it's really not the issue. That's not how we change governments in a democracy.
Those are very important points there. Now, of course, there's sort of reports here and there, different media, depends on who you're listening to and watching, around who is backing this process in Niger and the regional dimension of it. How much of a broader context is this development in Niger beyond it being a disgruntled general who was due to retire?
Well, I think it is important to talk about the regional elements to this. My assessment is that the trigger for the coup attempt was really at the micro level. It was General Chiani's machinations to try to seize power because he was disgruntled, and he's been able to mobilize some support from within other parts of the military to come along. We don't have any credible evidence at this time that there was a foreign actor behind the trigger for the coup. Now, that said, we do know that Russian disinformation has been fomenting dissent in Niger for the past year, really ever since the coup in Burkina Faso, and they have been promoting and creating rumors about previous coups in Niger. So really trying to stir the pot of trouble in Niger.
And of what benefit is that to Russia? Why would they want to do that?
Well, part of Russia's objectives on the continent right now are to displace Western influence. And Niger was the last remaining Sahelian democratizer, and it was working closely with, I should say, regional partners as well as with Western and UN agencies. And so, it's part of the Russian strategy in Africa to
is it
issue
only,
that they're.
I'm sorry again, I need to interrupt there. Could it be just Russia? If, for instance, the citizens or the nationals of these countries were satisfied with the development support and partnership and trade with France and US and the others in the West, would these happenings be taking place?
Well, I do think it's the Russian stirring up the pot that has inflamed these real grievances. But I think we have to be careful about when we say who is speaking for the country. So you had military coups, and now these juntas are the ones that are saying we don't want France, and we're pushing them out. Up until then, there had been quite extensive economic, commercial, trade, social, educational, cultural engagements between France and Mali, Burkina Faso, quite close relationships. And so if this is how these populations feel, that should be communicated and navigated through a democratic process. I think the point we often miss is that these juntas don't speak for the general populations. They speak for their very particular interest. They have not made any move to reform these countries on the governance side. They've done a terrible job with the security side. They've alienated all of their neighboring partners who had been helping with security. Their economies are crumbling. And who is benefiting from that? It's the juntas and it's Russia. So I think we have to be very skeptical about these claims that somehow this is a rebuke against France. Now, it ties into another regional dimension here that we've seen where the military juntas in Mali and Burkina Faso have come out and said, they support the coup in Niger. And if there's any move by ECOWAS to intervene to reverse the coup attempt, that they will declare, that they'll see it as a declaration of war. This is a really significant development because it suggests that these other military juntas aren't just focused on promoting peace and stability in their country as they claim. They really see this as a bigger platform, a bigger ideological push for military governments to rule. So
Sorry, Joe, I just want to come in there very quickly because, there's something really strategic. We've seen 19 coups and coup attempts in the region in most recent years or last few months. Really something significant is going on there. Something is happening that is just beyond military wanting to assert itself. What really is going on?
Well, I think there's a combination of factors. Let's keep in mind that we had seen a decline in the number of coups and coup attempts in the region and Africa, for pretty much the last 2 decades up until the last couple of years. And now we've seen this spike. And so I think it's a couple of factors. I do think Russia is central to it. It has been fomenting this dissent, this anti-colonialism grievance that it's fanning the flames of this dissent. This was very clearly a factor in the growing opposition and protest we saw in Mali before the coup attempt there. Same thing in Burkina Faso and now in Niger. There were coups of different types in Chad and in Sudan. But the fact that this is accepted, I think it is now opening up the door for other military actors with these, aspirations for seizing power to say this isn't off the table. That in fact it's pretty easy. We're the ones with the guns. The civilians don't have guns. We can take power, and there may be some disgruntlement, but people are going to accept it. So I think it's a really critical point right now.
Taking it back to the regional dimension now, so there's this threat from the military junta in Mali and Burkina Faso, and ECOWAS has been wanting to come in. There's stories of France wanting to get into there and evacuate its nationals and so on. Where do things stand at the moment?
Well, right now, the international community has been united in condemning the coup and calling for the reinstatement of President Bazoum. And ECOWAS has been taking the lead on this. There's currently a meeting, a 2-day meeting going on among the defense chiefs of staff, among the ECOWAS member states. They've given a deadline for the Nigerian junta to stand down by Sunday or risk further intervention. ECOWAS has closed the borders with Niger, and recently Nigeria has cut off electricity supplies to Niger. Niger is a poor country, as we all know, and highly dependent on support from its neighbors and international donors. And I think the military junta is recognizing that they need that international support, that regional support to survive. And so there's a lot of pressure being exerted right now. The hope is that there will be a logical negotiation and a standing down of the coup. If not, then we could see a ratcheting up of further pressure.
Yeah, and just to mention here that ECOWAS is the regional grouping which stands for Economic Community of West African States. That's the regional grouping of countries in that region. Again, I'll take you back to an important point you highlighted there with regard to Russia's involvement in the region. Apart from exerting itself, I think there's the whole aspect of the mineral wealth. Niger is rich in uranium. And one would imagine that, countries that are rich in mineral resources tend to be in conflict. And this is sometimes a proxy conflict, or it has international dimensions. Would that not be the reason why we are seeing a plethora of these military takeovers in the region?
Well, it's certainly a consideration to put on the table. But I believe when we dissect each of these coups, that the mineral part is a secondary factor. It's not a primary factor. These coups were led by the military actors in their countries. And then because these military actors did not have domestic support, they didn't have a lot of international support in Mali and Burkina Faso, they relied on Russia for backing, because that was the only international patron that would come in and recognize them. In Mali and Burkina Faso, they also sent in the Wagner mercenary troops. And as part of those deals, they were given access to natural resource. In Niger, right now, again, I don't see that the Russians were the main driver behind this, but if it were to unfold, certainly control over the uranium sites would be an important development.
Just one last question with regard to the current situation now and the standoff. What is the way forward for Niger?
Well, ideally, the way forward is that the junta will come to its senses and make a decision that's in the best interest of Niger, and find a face-saving way of stepping down, returning power to the duly elected president. There's a possibility that the junta will, not look at the situation rationally and decide, well, we can just hold on. And if we hold on long enough, eventually we're going to be recognized, like happened in Mali and Burkina Faso. So because those precedents are there, the Nigerian junta might say, well, we're going to call the bluff
Exactly.
of ECOWAS.
In fact, that's what I was
And-
going to say, that they haven't done that in Mali and Burkina Faso. Why would they want to do that in Niger? They're quite encouraged.
I think they are. And so I think this is a really inflection point for ECOWAS. It's an inflection point for governance in West Africa, because if the coup holds, then it's really, open season for military governments elsewhere in Africa to just say, well, we can seize power. Nobody's going to do anything about it. And a message needs to be conveyed to the military actors in Niger, and therefore to military actors elsewhere in Africa, that they should not be the ones who are deciding when they are, have the right to seize power.
Well, thank you very much. Hope that message will be firm enough and it sticks. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.